Welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman. In our lives, if we're lucky, we have mentors who help guide us and serve as role models, and I've been blessed with a series of mentors that I'm grateful for. We can also find mentors at a distance, writers and thinkers who deeply impact us through their work. One of my mentors at a distance is Seth Godin, and so it was a real thrill to interview Seth on episode 361 of this show. Another very important mentor at a distance in my life has been Stephen Pressfield, who's an absolute legend. He's the author of about a dozen books of fiction that are mostly set in the ancient world of Greece and Rome, and he's also an author of a series of nonfiction books. The first of these nonfiction self-help books is The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles, which is a modern classic. This book has been followed by Do the Work, Turning Pro, Tap Your Inner Power and Create Your Life's Work, The Artist's Journey, The Wake of the Hero's Journey and the Lifelong Pursuit of Meaning, Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, and Other Tough Love Truths to Make You a Better Writer, and The Warrior Ethos. I reread The War of Art and Turning Pro about every other year, and these books have been hugely important in shaping my own professional journey. And to give you some flavor of it, I'm going to read an excerpt here from The War of Art. So it says, Resistance's Greatest Hits. The following is a list, in no particular order, of those activities that most commonly elicit resistance. 1. The pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art, however marginal or unconventional. 2. The launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise, for profit or otherwise. 3. Any diet or health regimen. 4. Any program of spiritual advancement. 5. Any activity whose aim is tighter abdominals. 6. Any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit or addiction. 7. Education of every kind. 8. Any act of political, moral, or ethical courage, including the decision to change for the better some unworthy pattern of thought or conduct in ourselves. 9. The undertaking of any enterprise or endeavor whose aim is to help others. 10. Any act that entails commitment of the heart, the decision to get married, to have a child, to weather a rocky patch in a relationship. And 11, the taking of any principled stand in the face of adversity. And then Steve asks, now, what are the characteristics of resistance? And I'll just read you the titles of these very short mini chapters. Resistance is invisible. Resistance is internal. Resistance is insidious. Resistance is implacable. Resistance is impersonal. That's an important one for me. I'll read this one. It says, resistance is not out to get you personally. It doesn't know who you are and it doesn't care. Resistance is a force of nature. It acts objectively. Though it feels malevolent, resistance in fact operates with the indifference of rain and transits the heavens by the same laws as the stars. When we marshal our forces to combat resistance, we must remember this. I'll continue on here. Resistance is infallible. Resistance is universal. We're wrong if we think we're the only ones struggling with resistance. Everyone who has a body experiences resistance. Resistance never sleeps. Resistance plays for keeps. Resistance is fueled by fear. Resistance only opposes in one direction. Resistance is most powerful at the finish line. Resistance recruits allies. Resistance and procrastination. And that gives you some sense of the War of Art. At every entrepreneurial step I've taken, I've faced the resistance, and that book, The War of Art, has helped me recognize that force and push through it. I almost certainly would not have started this podcast if I hadn't read The War of Art. I wouldn't have had the chutzpah to create a 90 video course on how to set up your own consulting practice, or to organize impersonal professional development events and ask people to fly in from around the world, and I wouldn't have started Umbrex. Now, I continue to experience resistance every day. The lessons from the War of Art have given me the tools to recognize resistance for what it is and to fight back, to occasionally win. In fact, to use resistance as a compass, guiding me towards the initiatives that are the most important to pursue, because those are the ones that resistance most strongly encourages you to give up. I'm also a big fan of Steven Pressfield's novels, and his latest, A Man at Arms, is one of his best yet. The main character, Telamon, is a retired soldier in the Roman legion, and he's given the mission of hunting down an individual who is trying to deliver Paul's letter to the Corinthians, like in the Bible, the first epistle to the Corinthians, that letter. It's a gripping read. I couldn't put it down. I don't want to spoil it, but I liked it so much that I bought 25 copies to give away to listeners of this show. So to get your copy, visit bit.ly/getamanetarms, no spaces there, and that link is in the show notes. So now let's go to my discussion with Steve.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I read this book, A Man at Arms, which I absolutely love, over just the course of a weekend. I couldn't put it down. And Telamon seems to me a man who has not had a lot of friends. And over the course of this weekend, I received an email from a close friend of mine, and he told me that a friend of his who had been from college that he'd recently heard had committed suicide. And he shared a link to a podcast interview of Thomas Joyner, who's a clinical psychologist and a professor of psychology. He's an investigator with the Military Suicide Research Consortium, and is the author of Lonely at the Top, The High Cost of Men's Success. And so this just got me thinking about friends and men, and as they grow older, how sometimes it's harder to make new friends and to maintain them. And I'd love to hear what role friends have played in your life, and how you personally have kind of maintained friendships over the years. I know you talk in your books about your friendship with Sean Coyne and other writers and other people outside the writing profession. Just curious how the role of friends in your life.
That's a great question, Will. Actually, I just got back last week from a little golf vacation with a friend of mine who lives in Florida, that I've known him since we were 11 years old. So it's like, that's 66 years. And we make a point to get together, once or twice a year. And it's been a great thing to hang on to that friendship and not let that go away. But I definitely, the writer's life is a lonely life, right? I mean, you're pretty much, in your own head a lot of the time, professionally speaking. But I definitely feel like I make a point to hang on to friends and to try to make new ones, particularly as I get older, particularly to make younger friends, but which I do think keeps you young in that sense. But yeah, I do think that friends are tremendously important. I mean, we're tribal beings, we're social beings, and it's critical. On the other hand, I do think you can spend too much time hanging around with friends and avoiding your own calling, whatever that may be. So there's definitely a balance, in my opinion, between too much and too little. But I suppose it is sort of an epidemic, I would imagine, among successful men in contemporary America, that they don't have friends. It's hard to make new friends after a certain age,
I want to ask you about the muse. You talk in one of your books about how the muse, when she visits, if you ignore the muse, she tends to visit less frequently, and then she's a little quieter over time. But if you kind of act on the muse's ideas, she'll visit more frequently and be more friendly and share more. What's the experience for you of that visit from the muse?
Well, first of all, I definitely I agree with that. What I said. It's sort of like to me, Will. It's kind of like listening to your dreams, which I think come from the same source, a deep unconscious source, whatever that is. That like if you don't pay attention to your dreams, you'll start to lose them. Right? They won't come as frequently, and you won't remember them. But if you do make it a point to pay attention to your dreams, I always go to sleep with a little tape recorder next to me or a phone or something like that. As you pay attention to your dreams, you'll have more dreams and more vivid dreams. And whatever that source is, that mysterious unconscious source will communicate to you more. And definitely, I feel like when I'm writing a book, it's kind of like getting in physical training, that you can definitely be out of shape for it. And as you sit down the first day or something, you can only go so far, and you burn out. But as you go day after day after day, you develop a kind of a stamina, and also that unconscious source, whatever it is, that mysterious source, the muse does start appreciate that. I mean, for me, I think in anthropomorphic terms, so I like to think of a goddess that's hovering over me. But whether you think of that or whether it's some kind of quantum intelligence or something like that, the more you access it, the more it comes to you and the more open you are to it. So that in like writing a book that might take 2 years or 2.5, 3 years, by the time you're deeply into it, you are really, the pipeline is open, and stuff is flowing every day.
You showed your recorder. What else do you use, or is that your main technique for just capturing ideas that
yeah, that's my main technique. Yeah, I used to write it down, but it was like too cumbersome. But yeah, actually, I use my iPhone.
Yeah. So when you're walking out and about, if some idea occurs to you, you'll give yourself a voice memo, or
yeah, definitely, because I think when that sort of inspiration, that dimension breaks through, for whatever reason, I have found it's very easy to forget. It's just like a dream, it's not even like something that happens in real life, like where you say, oh, I'm going to remember this, and you do remember it. But it seems to me like a dream or a moment of intuition is very evanescent, it'll just go away like that. So to me, at least, it's very important to get it written down or recorded somehow.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll record something and even I'll listen to it like a day later, and I'll realize I forgot it completely, and I have to, re-immerse myself in it.
When you describe getting in a role when you're writing a book, do you find that, are there certain things that you can do to, draw more ideas from the muse, to, get those ideas coming more richly and densely and regularly?
I think it's just being in the habit of showing up every day and working every day, just like physical training, like if you were training to run a marathon or something like that. The consistency of doing it every day is very important. The muse appreciates it. She doesn't like it when we take too many days off.
What's your morning routine or daily routine look like?
It's been a little different with the pandemic because gyms have been closed. But I'm a gym person, and my schedule then was I would get up at like 3:15 and get to the gym by 4:15 or something like that, and work out, do a good. I have a trainer and I have guys that I train with, and definitely do something really hard as a start. Then you really want to hear this actual?
I do. So 3:15. So your day starts. So this is an early.
Sometimes I'd sleep into 4 o'clock or something like that.
All right.
But since the pandemic, I get up about 5. But then I would meet some friends for breakfast. If you ever go to some of these diners and you see like a few old guys hanging around together, I would meet some friends and we'd have breakfast together every day. And that would finish around 8:15 or something like that. And I'd go home and do my correspondence, whatever emails I had and stuff like that. And then by maybe 10 or 10:30, I'd start. And I work for as long as I can, which is maybe 3 hours. And then when I finish, the office is closed, I turn off my brain completely and don't worry about it at all. Let the muse work on it. And then I'll do whatever other stuff needs to be done, just in my real world, and then I'm to bed in bed, pretty early. So that's pretty much my schedule.
Yeah. What type of books do you read?
Almost always I read nonfiction rather than fiction. And I'm not sure why. Part of it is that I think if I'm reading somebody who has a very strong voice, that it'll contaminate my own voice. I'll start to be seduced by a really strong voice. But a lot of times what I'm reading is for research for what I'm working on, or something to reinforce me in what I'm doing. And another thing is I will read books multiple times. Like I just finished reading Night Flight by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, if you've ever read that. And another book called West with the Night by Beryl Markham. They're both about flyers back in the day, aviation, early aviation. And those are books I've read before, and just that, that I admire and that I get stuff out of again and again.
Now, you talked about research. In A Man at Arms, there's an extraordinary sense of place, of really being there. And I was also really struck by the details, such as the types of herbs that the witch picks, right? And as I was going along, I was curious, because you've talked before about how you will completely use your imagination, and you talked about how you wrote a book about being in prison, and folks asked if you had, when you did time.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was curious, did you pull those out of some tome on herbal remedies, or where did you come up with these?
That's a great question, Will. Like I think a lot of that originally came from me from reading. Have you ever read Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan, the mystical? Anyway, they were really popular maybe 20, 25 years ago. And it was this Carlos Castaneda, I guess, is a young Mexican American, or maybe he's a Mexican. And he tells his story. I can't tell whether it's real or not, where he goes to the Sonoran Desert and he meets this Yaqui shaman medicine man named Don Juan, who they go out into the desert and they pick all these various herbs, these psychedelic mushrooms and things like that. And so I very definitely was sort of aware that in those harsh climates, the plants are psychotropic, and there's all kinds of stuff that you can do, healing stuff. So I did look it up. I did look up a bunch of stuff. Actually, I used the internet, Wikipedia and that kind of thing. Normally I would go to a book for it, but I'm lazy. But I also would, like you say, I'd invent names of something, that some sort of a plant. And if you invent them nicely enough, they seem very real. So, but I absolutely was trying to do that, Will, to try and give the reader a sense that they were really there and in the desert, and that they're really, rather than say a plant or a tree, I think it's always important to name the plant and name the tree. And it makes it much more vivid. And even if you made up the name, it makes it much more vivid for the reader, much more believable.
Now, this is many different types of stories, but one way to think about this story, it's that a classic theme of needing to deliver a message.
Yes.
And a couple times I thought about that essay from 100 years ago, A Message to Garcia, which my engineer officer made me read when I reported to my submarine. And so what is it about the kind of the story of delivering a message that inspires you? And are there other types of, delivering a message type stories that influenced you when you thought about this book?
Well, if you think about stories in general, there are a number of sort of classic themes, right, that people revisit over and over, classic structures, let's say. And delivering a message is one of those, right? Another, like if you've ever seen the Transporter movies with Jason Statham, do you know those that I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
The gist of those stories are very similar. It's like a a tough guy, a mercenary or something like that, has to take a person and deliver that person, like a young princess or something, has to take her, from somewhere and deliver her to the king, whatever it is, right? And they have to cross some desolate wasteland, and there are all kinds of bad guys trying to kill there's a bunch of movies of that type. There's one called Season of the Witch with Nicolas Cage. There's other stories where someone has to protect like a young prodigy, a mathematical prodigy or something like that. And they make great stories. It's a great structure that from a writer's point of view, you could just sort of steal that structure and just hit the beats, but delivering a message is another great thing because it has a built-in climax, right? That's going to pull the reader through. Is the message going to get through, and what will the effect of it be? And then in addition to that, I'm just thinking of it from a writer's point of view. Then you have the message itself. Like, what is the message? Is it just some, bogus thing that somebody invented, or is it something really pertinent? Like, I don't know if you saw the The Book of Eli with Denzel Washington. And anyway, it just is a great classic structure.
Yeah. There's two children in this book that play really important roles. David, the kind of young apprentice to Telamon, and then the feral girl, the mute feral girl. I'm not sure if she gets named, right? And
yes, Ruth. She has a name.
Ruth, right. And then that got me thinking about kids and education, and got me thinking about your series of the War of Art books and the resistance. And it seems to me that schools are almost designed to embed and reinforce the resistance in kids, and teaching them to kind of obey authority, to not step out of line, to do what they're told, to study for the test. And would be interested to hear your thoughts, Steve, on what do you think schools could do instead to help train kids to fight the resistance and to enter the artist journey, to become creative, as opposed to almost beating that out of them?
Are you familiar with Seth Godin?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much.
Yeah. He's I think in his heart, he's really an educator. And he's really very much interested in that whole process of what is education. And he very much says that, like, school, as you and I know it, sort of arises from the industrialized world and sort of preparing us to be drones that will go sit in a factory all day, and so that's what kind of education is. It's like, I just went in 2 days ago for my second COVID shot.
Congrats.
And it's an experience in standing in line, right? And being in line and waiting patiently. And it's school, right? It's what they taught you. But I'm not so sure. I've always wondered why, the idea of resistance and what I write about in the War of Art, they never taught me that in school. Nobody ever told me that. They don't teach you that in the Army or the Navy or anything like that. And I've wondered why, and I think it's because if you learn that, you're going to leave school, and I think that I don't know how that could be taught in school. It's a great question, because it's almost like school is the process of dumbing you down or of making you a drone, and rather than liberating you to run free or something like that. So I'm not so. It's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is.
Or alternately, what do you think parents can do, for their own kids to really help them understand what the resistance is about, and to, help, free them from those constraints so they can explore their creative passions?
I mean, I think the example would be the best way. If your mom or dad, or if you're a mom and or you're a dad, if you're living your life that way, then that's a great thing. But also, I think explaining to your kids, this is, when daddy goes into his room and closes the door, he's not just, doing something stupid. He's entering a realm inside his own head and contacting dimensions of reality, and trying to pull whatever, the creative thing and reinforcing the child in that. But I think kids can read The War of Art and books like that at a reasonably young age and get something out of it. But I do think it's very helpful to expose a young child to that concept, that there is a force of self-sabotage inside all of our heads, and that's like the number one. Before we can accomplish anything else, we have to find some way of confronting that and overcoming it.
Yeah. For me, the most valuable part of that message in your books is that the resistance is impersonal and universal, and that it's not just about you. It's like, guess what? Everybody's experiencing the force of gravity and stuck to the earth, and it's not like you in particular. It's the same with resistance. That to me was such a liberating concept, so that and really helped me in terms of kind of running my business and doing what I do, in terms of, like avoiding it and thinking that, oh, it's just about you and there's all these reasons. No, it's a universal thing, and that when you are aware of resistance, that can be a compass to tell you what you need to be doing.
Yes. I mean, I wish that everybody could see the emails that I get from people. Anybody who doesn't believe that resistance is universal, people write me over, and it's always the same thing. The voice that's in your head is the same voice that's in my head. That it is universal. And you're right. I think it is very helpful to realize that, because what resistance is very clever about, it's diabolically clever about making you think that it's talking to you alone, and that this is your real voice in your real head saying these things to you, that you're a bum, you're a loser, you have no right to tackle this project. It's been done before, it's been done better than anything you've ever done. And then citing specific, things about your own head. You're really trying to overcome this fixation with your father and prove to your father that you're blah, 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 right? So it sounds like it's really you, or it's really addressing you, but it's just a universal diabolical force, hitting everybody with their own kind of personal seeming stuff.
You talk in Turning Pro that a professional recognizes another professional. And I'd be interested to hear how you recognize another professional. And if you meet someone, kind of how long does that take for you to decide if this person is a professional or an amateur? What's that experience like for you?
It's another great question, Will. I think it's within a few seconds. I think you sort of get it. And I certainly didn't used to get it. It took me years and years and years when I was an amateur myself, and I couldn't, I couldn't tell from one person was legitimate to another. But I do think somehow there's something, I don't know what it is, in the eyes, something in the voice, something where you can just tell that this person has undergone an ordeal and an initiation. I imagine it's like being a submarine officer, right? You have to go through a long, long thing before you finally, get the bars on your shoulder. And I'm sure you can tell another person that really knows their shit one way or another. But it's sort of, I guess it's a look in the eye, a sense of commitment. You can just tell whether somebody is, and I can certainly tell, because people write me emails and letters all the time asking for help, asking for advice or whatever. And when somebody's an amateur, or you just can absolutely tell it, and you can tell that they're not ready to hear whatever you might want to say. It's a waste of time to try to communicate with somebody like that. And you can just tell by the level of, I guess I'm rambling on here, Will, but I think a lot of it has to do with the level of ego. The more ego that a person is displaying, the less professional they are, and the more they're stuck in a kind of in an earlier phase of initiation or self-initiation. Like, I think once somebody, reaches that point where they've kind of turned a corner and become a real pro, they are for one thing, they're very generous. They're kind. You will never hear somebody saying something snarky or rotten about somebody else. At the worst, they'll say nothing.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know if that's an answer, Will, but you definitely can tell.
Mm. If I think about the word masculinity, and if I ask people what's the first adjective that comes to mind that modifies masculinity, I think in current days, the most common adjective you would get would be toxic masculinity. Now, I think of your kind of approach to creativity as being a very kind of muscular approach, right? It's like you're fighting resistance. And in A Man at Arms, the character I'd say is, Telamon, very kind of masculine hero. Also, part of the book in the end, really embracing love. And one would love to get your thoughts around what you think about as kind of how you think about masculinity, how you think about kind of male virtues, if there are such a thing, and maybe what some of the dangers are for our culture when masculinity gets kind of such a bad reputation.
That's a deep question, Will. I certainly think that there's a difference between masculinity and femininity. That femininity, I would say, is more of a nurturing, outer directed, something that is helping others, something that's helping and protecting others, particularly young children, stuff like that. But also nurturing and helping the entire community, binding the community together. Femininity, I think, is a very giving force. It's like the earth itself that gives, that from which fruits and trees and plants grow. Whereas masculinity is to me a more of an outward directed thing. In this, if we go back to the primitive hunting band, it's the men in the hunting band that go out and bring back the bacon, right? They chase the mastodons and beat them over the head and bring them back to the cave. But I think today, when the frontier is gone, when that sort of caveman type of reality is gone, where we can just go to the grocery store and buy our hamburgers in a nice little package. The question is, where does that aggressive outward force go? And I think that's where it can turn really toxic, because there are very few, let's say, real outlets for that. I mean, business is one. You can be kind of competing and use that sort of masculine aggressiveness. Sports is another. And there are tons of people that are into extreme, endurance things and stuff like that, which is a great way to do that, to keep that masculine, aggressive, outward energy from turning toxic. For me, it's directed inwardly. For me, as a writer, as an artist, I'm turning that aggressiveness into creating, what I hope is art, but books, stories, whatever, that kind of thing. Now, I think today we have so many people who have not found a constructive outlet for that masculinity that it turns toxic. It flows into different channels. The whole thing of partisanship that is out there today, that's dominating America, where we pick an enemy, we radicalize ourselves online by just hearing the same crap over and over and over again. That takes us down a rabbit hole, and that masculinity becomes turned outward into hating other people, and it's rampant today. I mean, just the crazy shootings that we've had in the last couple. So it's a real crisis, toxic masculinity. And I think it's because if people would face their own resistance and follow their own heart to do whatever their particular calling is, they wouldn't have any need to express this masculinity in a toxic, inappropriate manner, in my opinion.
All right. Steve, this is such a great book. I'm giving out some copies. There's a link in the show notes. Where else would you like to send people who want to find out more about A Man at Arms? I think you have a website.
Yeah, anybody can just go to my website, which is just my name, Stephen Pressfield, and it tells, about the book. And also, if you wanted to go deeper into other stuff in this website, which is more the war of art type of stuff, if you click on the X at the top right-hand corner, it takes you to the underlying website that's about those books about creativity.
Fantastic. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks, Will. You asked some great questions, made me think really hard. And thank you very much for initiating this. And, good luck and God bless. Best to all your listeners. And give me a shout if you ever want to do it again.
All right. Thank you.